The Apache elders had a name for her: Cheetah. It meant the cursed one. She was born with eyes the color of a frozen winter sky and hair that looked like it had been touched by fire. In a tribe of people with hair like polished jet and eyes like dark earth, she was an omen, a walking, breathing sign of ill fortune. So when she was 16, they cast her out, declared her a bearer of bad spirits, a stain upon the people. She was driven from the only home she'd ever known, sent to wander the desert alone. Now, 3 years later, she was 19. She lived in the deepest part of the Red Canyon, a place so desolate and feared that even the coyotes gave it a wide berth. She had survived. She had hunted. She had found water. She had learned the hard language of solitude. What the elders didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that their curse was about to become another man's obsession. And that obsession would ride into her life on a storm-black stallion, with spurs that sang a silver song against the silence. The morning sun painted the canyon walls a deep, bloody crimson when Ayanna first heard it. The faint, rhythmic echo of horseshoes on stone. She moved like a ghost, pressing herself flat against the warm sandstone, her hand closing around the familiar leather hilt of her hunting knife. 3 years of exile had etched one lesson onto her soul. Visitors meant trouble. And in the Arizona Territory of 1887, trouble usually came with a gun. He emerged from the shadows of the narrow passage like something from a fever dream. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and hair the color of prairie wheat, bleached by 1,000 suns. He sat his black stallion with the easy, boneless grace of a man who had been born in the saddle. His clothes marked him as a cowboy, leather chaps worn smooth and dark with use, a hat that had seen more sunsets than most men see in a lifetime, but it was his eyes that stole the air from her lungs. They were green, not the dull green of cactus, but the vibrant, impossible green of spring grass after a long rain. They scanned the canyon, and when they landed on her, they held none of the hardness she expected from a white man. None of the fear or revulsion most showed when they glimpsed her unusual features. Instead, they held a startling, unnerving focus, as if he hadn't just stumbled upon her, as if he had been looking for her all along. "Easy there, miss," he said, his voice a slow Texas drawl that seemed out of place in the sharp-edged canyon. "I'm not here to cause you any trouble." Ayanna didn't move. Her blade was steady in her hand, a silent warning. "This is the cursed canyon, cowboy. Trouble is the only thing that lives here." He tilted his hat back, giving her a better look at his face. It was a handsome face, etched with lines that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "Name's Jeremiah Stone. Jerry to my friends, and I reckon I'm good and lost." He gestured vaguely at the maze of red rock behind him. "Been looking for the trail to Tucson. Horse through a shoe, and we've been picking our way careful-like ever since." She studied him with the unblinking gaze of a hawk. It was a good story. Believable. His horse, a magnificent animal, did favor its left foreleg. His water skin hung nearly flat against his saddle. If it was a lie, it was a damn good one. But something felt wrong. The way he looked at her wasn't the glance of a lost traveler. It was the stare of a hunter who had just cornered his prey. "You're a long way from any trail to Tucson," she said, her voice flat. He let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a pickle. Don't suppose you know where a man might find some water? There's a spring, 1/2 a mile up the canyon. Much obliged." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture of politeness that seemed at odds with the intensity in his gaze. "Mind if I ask your name, miss? Seeing as you're helping me and all?" She hesitated. Her Apache name, Cheetah, was a brand. But giving a white name felt like a betrayal of the person she'd been forced to become. Yet something in his directness, in the sheer force of his presence, made her want to give a piece of herself. "Ayanna," she said, the name her mother had whispered to her in secret. It meant, eternal blossom. His eyes widened, just for a second. A flicker of something, recognition, confirmation, shone in their green depths before being instantly suppressed. Ayana, he repeated, testing the sound. That's a pretty name. He paused, and a slow, easy smile spread across his face. A smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Means eternal blossom, don't it? The blood in her veins turned to ice. Few white men knew any Apache words. Almost none would know the meaning of a name like Ayana. It wasn't a common name. It was a private family name. The calm, folksy cowboy persona evaporated, replaced by the chilling reality of the man beneath. He wasn't lost. He wasn't a drifter. He was here for her, and he already knew who she was. A silence stretched between them, thick and heavy as the desert heat. The birds stopped singing. The wind died. All Ayana could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart and the quiet, steady breathing of the man who had just dismantled her world with a single sentence. "How do you know that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The knife in her hand felt flimsy, useless. Jeremiah Stone's smile faded, replaced by a look of weary resignation. "I learned it from a man who knew your mother." Her mother. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her mother had been dead for 7 years, taken by a fever that swept through their camp. She was the only one who had ever looked at Ayana without a trace of fear, the only one who called her Ayana instead of Chita. "You're lying," she breathed, but the words had no conviction. "No, ma'am, I'm not," he said, his voice losing its folksy drawl, becoming sharper, more direct. The man's name was Elias Vance, an old trapper. He passed on last spring. But before he did, he paid me a handsome sum to find his daughter's child, the one the Apache cast out, the one with eyes like the winter sky. Every word was a nail hammering her to the canyon wall. A secret she never even knew existed was being laid bare by a complete stranger. Elias Vance, a white man, her grandfather, the source of her cursed features, the reason she was an outcast. It was too much. A lifetime of questions were being answered in the worst possible way. "Why?" she asked, her mind reeling. "Why would he send you?" "He wanted you to have something," Jerry said. He reached slowly, carefully, into his saddlebag. He wasn't reaching for a gun. His movements were slow, deliberate. He pulled out a worn leather pouch. "He told me to give you this, and to tell you he was sorry." He tossed the pouch onto the ground between them. It landed with a soft thud. Ayana stared at it, her whole body trembling. This man, Jeremiah Stone, wasn't just a cowboy. He was a messenger from a ghost, a specter from a past she never knew she had. He had shattered the foundations of her identity. But as she looked from the pouch back to his face, a new, colder suspicion began to form. He was too skilled, too calm. Bounty hunters, messengers. They had a certain look about them, a hardness. Jerry had it, but it was buried deep. He was wearing his kindness like a mask. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. "Not just a man for hire. Who are you, really?" He swung his leg over his stallion and dismounted, landing with a soft crunch of boots on gravel. He stood to his full height, and for the first time, she felt a true sense of physical intimidation. He was much larger than he'd seemed on horseback. "That's a longer story, Ayana," he said, his green eyes boring into hers. "For now, let's just say I'm the man who knows your biggest secret." He took a step closer. "And you're not the only one I'm trying to save from it." The implication hung in the air, sinister and terrifying. He wasn't just delivering a message, he was running from something. And by finding her, he had just dragged her into the chase. She glanced down at the pouch, then back at him. Her sanctuary was no longer safe. Her solitude was shattered. This man hadn't just brought her the past, he had brought danger, and as she stared into his guarded green eyes, she realized the truth. The Apache may have cast her out to protect themselves from a curse, but Jeremiah Stone had just found her to protect her from a monster. That night, an uneasy truce settled over the small camp by the spring. Ayanna had let him water his horse and had shared her meager meal of roasted rabbit, more out of a need to keep him close and watch him than out of any sense of hospitality. He was a puzzle she had to solve, a threat she needed to understand. He sat across the small fire from her, sharpening a knife on a whetstone. The rhythmic scrape of steel on stone was the only sound besides the crackle of the flames. He had not pressed her to open the leather pouch from her grandfather. He seemed content to wait, letting the reality of his revelations sink in. "You said you were trying to save me," she said, breaking the silence. "Save me from what?" Jerry didn't look up from his knife. "From the man who's looking for you." "Why is he looking for me?" "Because of what you are." He finally paused, his green eyes catching the firelight. "Your grandfather, Elias, he wasn't just a trapper. He was part of an expedition years ago. They were looking for something, a place, a treasure, some called it. They never found it. But they found stories, legends, a prophecy." The word hung in the air, tasting of superstition and doom. It was the language of the medicine woman, of the elders who had condemned her. "The prophecy spoke of a key," Jerry continued, his voice low and serious. "A living key. A child born of two peoples, with eyes of sky and hair of fire. A child who could lead the way to this hidden place." Ayanna felt a cold dread creep up her spine. "And this man? He believes I am this key?" "He doesn't just believe it. He's obsessed with it. His name is Colonel Alistair Blackwood, a former cavalry officer, dishonorably discharged. He spent the last 20 years and a considerable fortune hunting down artifacts, legends, and unique people. He collects them. He thinks the prophecy is real, and he thinks you belong to him." The casual way he spoke of a man who collects people was more terrifying than any shouted threat. "So you're what? A rival collector?" For the first time, a shadow of real pain crossed Jerry's face. He put down his knife and stared into the fire. "No, I'm the man whose life he destroyed." The silence that followed was different. It was heavy with unspoken grief. "I had a wife once," Jerry said, his voice thick with memory. "Her name was Elizabeth. She was a historian, a researcher. Brilliant. She studied native legends, forgotten maps, stories the world had written off as folklore. She was the one who first uncovered the full legend of the living key." He picked up a stick and poked at the embers, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. "She thought it was just a fascinating story, a myth. But Blackwood found out about her research. He believed it was a literal roadmap. He came to our home in Austin. He didn't want her notes. He wanted her. He wanted her knowledge, her mind. When she refused to help him, he—" Jerry's voice broke. He took a long, shuddering breath. "He killed her," he finished, the words raw and brutal. "He and his men. They made it look like a robbery. But I knew it was Blackwood. I've been hunting him ever since. For 5 years, I've been one step behind him, trying to unravel his plans, trying to find a way to make him pay." Ayanna stared at him, her own solitude and pain seeming small and insignificant in the face of his raw, gaping wound. His entire story, his entire life for the past 5 years, was a quest for vengeance. "A few months ago I got a lead," Jerry continued, his voice regaining its hard edge. "I heard Blackwood was on his way to Arizona. He'd heard a rumor from an old Apache informant about a girl cast out from her tribe years ago, a girl with the right description. I knew I had to find you before he did." He looked at her then, his green eyes blazing with an intensity that was part desperation, part grim determination. "Your grandfather's message was a coincidence. a stroke of luck that led me right to you. But make no mistake, Ayana, I would have found you anyway, because Blackwood is coming, and he will not stop until he has you." The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. They looked like grasping hands, reaching for her. She was no longer Chaita, the cursed outcast. She was Ayana, the living key. A piece of a puzzle, a target. She finally reached for the leather pouch her grandfather had sent. Her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the drawstring. Inside, nestled in soft doe skin, was a single object. It was a piece of stone, dark and smooth, shaped like a flattened teardrop. Carved into its surface was a symbol she had never seen before, a spiral that ended in a star. As her skin touched the stone, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread into her palm. It felt ancient, alive, and in that moment, she knew. Jerry was telling the truth. The prophecy, the kernel, the danger, it was all real. Her exile was over. Her life as a hunted woman had just begun. Before the sun had even begun to hint at its arrival, the peace of the canyon was shattered. It wasn't the sound of a single horse this time. It was the muffled, rhythmic thunder of many hooves, moving with purpose, moving with skill. "They're here," Jerry said, his voice a low growl. He was already on his feet, his gun belt strapped on, his rifle in his hand. The weary avenger was gone, replaced by a seasoned fighter. "How many?" Ayana closed her eyes, listening, parsing the sounds echoing through the narrow passages. It was a skill she had perfected over 3 years of solitude. "5," she said, her own voice calm despite the frantic beating of her heart. "Moving fast, Apache." Her blood ran cold. It could only be one group. "We need to get out of sight," she said, already kicking sand over their small fire. "There are caves high up on the east wall." "No," Jerry said, his gaze fixed on the canyon entrance. "No more running. Not yet. We need to know why they're here." As the first golden rays of dawn spilled over the canyon rim, 5 riders emerged from the shadows. They were exactly who she feared they would be. At the front rode Daklugi, her cousin, his face a mask of grim authority. Beside him were 3 younger warriors she recognized from her childhood, their faces hard, their eyes holding the familiar mix of pity and fear. But it was the 5th rider that made her breath catch in her throat. It was the old medicine woman, Nan-I-Chill. Her hair was silver, her face a web of deep-set wrinkles, and her eyes were like chips of black flint. She was the one who had first pointed her bony finger at the infant Ayana and declared her cursed. She was the architect of Ayana's exile. "Daklugi," Ayana whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "You know him?" Jerry asked, not taking his eyes off the approaching party. "My cousin," she said, her hand instinctively going to the knife at her belt. "He's the one who led the council that cast me out, and the woman, she is the one who declared me a curse." The riders halted 20 yards away, a silent, menacing line. Daklugi dismounted, his hands held open and away from his weapons, but his posture screamed authority. "Chaita," he called out, his voice sharp, using the name that had been her brand of shame. "The elders have sent for you. You will come with us." Ayana stepped forward, Jerry moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with her. He was a solid, reassuring presence at her side. "I was cast out, cousin," Ayana called back, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "I have no place among the people." "The elders have reconsidered," Daklugi said, his dark eyes flicking to Jerry, lingering on the rifle in his hands. The distaste on his face was clear. "There are matters you must answer for." It was the old medicine woman who spoke next, her voice thin and reedy, but cutting through the morning air like a shard of glass. "Child, since you left, the spirits have been angry. The rains have failed. The hunting grows poor. Sickness has taken our children." The familiar weight of blame settled onto Ayana's shoulders. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't just superstition anymore. It was a lie to cover a deeper fear. They didn't want her back because of a drought. They wanted her back because of Colonel Blackwood. That's enough. Jerry's voice was like the cocking of a hammer. The lady hasn't done a thing, and she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Daklugi's gaze settled on him, heavy and cold. The white man will be silent. This is Apache business. Her business is my business now, Jerry retorted, his hand moving to rest on the butt of his pistol. The standoff stretched, the air vibrating with tension. It was 5 armed warriors against 1 man and the woman they considered a curse. The odds were impossible. But as Ayanna looked at her cousin's face, she saw something beyond anger. She saw fear. Daklugi was afraid. "There is a way," the old medicine woman said, urging her horse forward a few steps. "A ceremony, to bind the spirits you carry, to contain the curse. You will be brought back to the people. You will be cared for, but you will be kept apart, a guardian of our misfortune. It is the only way to protect the tribe. A guardian, a prisoner, a scapegoat to be hidden away. It was their solution, their way of dealing with the threat of Blackwood. They would lock her up, hide the key from the world, and hope the monster went away." "No," Ayanna said, the word clear and final. Daklugi's face hardened. "You do not have a choice, Chita." "The hell she doesn't," Jerry snapped. He took a half step in front of Ayanna, shielding her. "She's a grown woman, and she's staying right here." One of the younger warriors reached for his bow, but Daklugi shot him a look that froze him in place. This wasn't a simple retrieval. It was something more complicated. "You don't understand, white man," Daklugi said, his voice laced with a strange, desperate frustration. "You cannot protect her from what is coming. We can. We can hide her, keep her safe in the old way." "By locking her in a cage?" Jerry scoffed. "You're not trying to protect her. You're trying to protect a secret, the secret of the hidden place, the one Blackwood is looking for." A wave of shock rolled through the Apache warriors. Their eyes darted from Jerry to Ayanna and back again. He had spoken their deepest fear aloud. He knew. The medicine woman's flinty eyes narrowed. "You know too much, white man. The spirits that follow this girl will devour you." "Let them try," Jerry said. He turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting Ayanna's. His green eyes were steady, full of a fire that mirrored her own. "Your choice, Ayanna. You want to go with them? I won't stop you. But you go because you choose it. Not because they scare you into it." For a long moment, the canyon held its breath. Ayanna looked at her cousin, at the old woman who had defined her life with a single word, at the warriors who had once been her playmates. She saw their fear, their desperation. They were trying to save their people in the only way they knew how, by sacrificing her. Then she looked at Jerry, a man she'd known for less than a day, a man with his own ghosts, his own war to fight, a man who was willing to stand against impossible odds for her. She had been a victim of their fear for too long. "I choose to stay," she said, her voice echoing in the sudden, profound silence. The medicine woman's face contorted into a mask of fury. "Then you are truly cursed, and the white man who stands with you will share your fate. You will bring ruin on this place, just as you brought it upon us." Before anyone could react, she raised a hand and let out a high, piercing shriek. It wasn't a cry of anger. It was a signal. From the rocks above them, on both sides of the canyon, more figures rose. Archers, at least a dozen of them, bows already drawn, arrows aimed not at her, but directly at Jeremiah Stone. It was never a negotiation. It was an ambush. They hadn't come to ask. They had come to take her, and to eliminate the one person who stood in their way. The world exploded into chaos. Jerry reacted with the instinct of a man who had lived his life in the shadow of sudden violence. He didn't hesitate, didn't look up. He shoved Ayana hard, sending her stumbling backward toward the cover of a large boulder as the first volley of arrows sliced through the air where they had been standing. The sound was a terrifying, whispery hiss, a chorus of death. "Get down!" he roared, diving in the opposite direction, his rifle already at his shoulder. He fired from the ground, a single, deafening shot that wasn't aimed at a man, but at the rock face just above Daklugi. A shower of stone chips rained down, forcing the warriors on the ground to flinch and scatter. It was a breath, a single, precious second of time. Ayana scrambled behind the boulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pressed herself against the stone, her knife in her hand, her mind racing. This was her fault. They were here for her. Jerry was going to die because of her. The old woman's curse felt suddenly, horribly real. She peered around the edge of the rock. Jerry was using the terrain like a master, rolling from one meager piece of cover to the next, never staying in one place for more than a heartbeat. He was firing his rifle sparingly, each shot placed to disrupt and confuse, not to kill. He was a professional fighter, outnumbered 20-1, and he was holding his own. But for how long? Daklugi and his men had recovered, spreading out, using the canyon's natural features for cover. The archers above were repositioning, trying to get a clear shot at the lone gunman who moved like a phantom below. Ayana knew this canyon better than any of them. She knew its secrets, its hidden paths, its treacherous drops. She had survived here for 3 years. She would not be a damsel cowering behind a rock. She saw her chance. A narrow game trail, almost invisible from the canyon floor, snaked up the rock face about 50 feet from her position. It led to a ledge directly behind the largest group of archers. It was a steep, dangerous climb, but she had made it 100 times before. Without a second thought, she holstered her knife and began to climb. Her fingers and toes found familiar holds in the sandstone. She moved quickly, silently, her body a shadow against the red rock. Below her, the battle raged. A shot from Jerry's pistol echoed through the canyon, followed by an angry cry. He was still fighting. He was still alive. The thought gave her strength. She pulled herself over the final lip of rock and onto the ledge. Just as she'd calculated, she was behind them. 6 archers, their backs to her, their entire focus on the deadly dance happening on the canyon floor below. She didn't have a rifle. She didn't have a bow. She had a knife and the element of surprise. She took a deep breath, drew her blade, and launched herself forward. She slammed into the back of the nearest archer, sending him screaming over the ledge. His cry of shock and terror was cut short by the sickening crunch of his body hitting the rocks below. The other 5 whirled around, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. They saw her, the cursed girl, the ghost of the canyon, standing there with a bloody knife in her hand and murder in her eyes. For a split second, they were paralyzed by superstitious fear. It was all the time she needed. She lunged, not with the finesse of a trained warrior, but with the desperate fury of a cornered animal. She slashed, she stabbed, she kicked. She was a whirlwind of rage and survival. One man went down, clutching a deep gash in his leg. Another stumbled back, his bow falling from his grasp. Her sudden, savage attack from behind had thrown the entire ambush into disarray. The warriors below looked up, their attention diverted. It was the opening Jerry needed. He burst from his cover, firing his pistols with deadly accuracy. 2 of Daklugi's men fell. The tide of the battle had turned in a heartbeat. Daklugi screamed a command in Apache, a furious order to retreat. The remaining warriors broke and ran, melting back into the canyons they had emerged from. The archers on the opposite ridge, seeing their comrades routed, vanished from sight. In the sudden, ringing silence, Ayana stood on the ledge, her chest heaving, her knife dripping red. The medicine woman, Nanai Chil, was the only one who hadn't fled. She sat on her horse, staring up at Ayana, her ancient face unreadable. Then, With a slow, deliberate movement, she turned her horse and rode away, disappearing into the shadows without a backward glance. Ayana slowly lowered her knife. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, shuddering tremor. She had just killed a man. She had fought her own people. "Ayana!" Jerry's voice, raw and full of concern, echoed up from the canyon floor. She looked down. He was standing in the middle of the battle-scarred ground, looking up at her. His shirt was torn, and there was a bloody gash on his forehead. But he was alive. He was standing. He had stayed. He had fought for her. He had trusted her to be more than a victim. Slowly, carefully, she made her way back down the rock face. When her feet touched the ground, her legs gave out. Jerry was there in an instant, catching her, holding her up. His arms were strong and steady around her. "You're hurt," she said, her voice hoarse, reaching up to touch the cut on his forehead. "It's nothing," he said, his green eyes searching her face, his expression a mixture of awe and relief. "Ayana, what you did up there?" "I had to," she whispered, leaning against him, the reality of the last few minutes crashing down on her. "They were going to kill you." "We make a good team," he said softly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He looked around at the silent canyon, at the bodies of the fallen Apache. "But we can't stay here. They'll be back, and they'll bring more than archers next time." He was right. They had declared war on her people, or her people had declared war on them. "And Blackwood is still out there," she said, the name a cold stone in her gut. "He is," Jerry agreed. He gently took the bloody knife from her hand. "We need to disappear, somewhere he won't think to look. Somewhere a man and a woman can start over, no questions asked." He held her gaze, his own unwavering. "I know a place. It's a long ride. Dangerous, but it might be our only chance." "Where?" she asked. "A valley, in the Colorado Territory. Green grass, clean water, a place a person can build a home." He paused, and his next words were quiet, but held the weight of a solemn vow. "I was going to go there after I dealt with Blackwood. Settle down. Try to build a life on the ashes of my old one. But I won't go without you, Ayana. I can't." The ashes of his old life. She looked at her own hands, still shaking, stained with the blood of her cousin's warrior. Her old life had been burned to the ground this morning. All that was left were the ashes. Maybe, just maybe, something new could be built upon them. "Okay," she said, her voice finding a new, hard-won resolve. "Colorado." His grip on her tightened, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged between them in blood and gunfire. They weren't just a messenger and a target anymore. They were partners, survivors. And as they stood in the silent, blood-soaked canyon, they both knew one thing for certain. Their journey was just beginning, and the road ahead would be paved with danger. They traveled north, moving with a desperate urgency. They rode hard during the day and made cold camps at night, never lighting a fire, knowing that the smoke could be a beacon for their hunters. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant sound was the potential approach of either Deklugi's warriors or Blackwood's men. During those long days in the saddle and quiet nights under a blanket of stars, Ayana and Jerry began to forge a bond that went deeper than shared danger. He taught her how to handle a pistol, his large hands guiding hers, his touch sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. She, in turn, taught him the silent language of the land, how to read tracks in the dust, how to find water where none seemed to exist, how to move through the wilderness without leaving a trace. She learned the details of his 5-year hunt for Colonel Blackwood. He had been a Texas Ranger before he met Elizabeth, a man who understood violence and order. After her death, he had become something else, a ghost, living on the fringes, gathering information, waiting for his chance to strike. He had become as relentless and obsessed as the man he hunted. He, in turn, coaxed from her the story of her exile. He listened as she spoke of the loneliness, the fear, and the slow, painful process of learning to survive not just the harshness of the desert, but the crushing weight of being utterly alone. He didn't offer pity. He offered something far more valuable: respect. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he told her one evening as they shared a strip of dried jerky, watching the sun set behind a distant mesa. "To endure that, to come out of it with your spirit intact, you're not cursed, Ayanna. You're forged in a fire most people couldn't imagine." His words were a balm on wounds she didn't even know were still raw. For the first time in her life, someone saw her as strong, not strange. But their fragile peace was shattered 2 weeks into their journey. They were crossing a wide, open plain when Jerry suddenly reined in his stallion, his body going tense. "What is it?" Ayanna asked, following his gaze. In the distance, a dust cloud was rising against the horizon. A single rider, moving at a steady, relentless pace. Not Apache. The style of riding was wrong. "It's one of his," Jerry said, his voice grim. "A scout. Blackwood's men have a certain look. Can we outrun him? In this open country? No. He's seen us. He'll signal the others." Jerry's mind was already working, his eyes scanning the flat, unforgiving landscape. "We have to split up." "No," Ayanna said immediately. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to," he insisted, his green eyes intense. "He's after you. The key. I'm just the man who's in his way. You're the prize. You need to keep going north. Follow this river. It'll lead you into the foothills. Find a place to hide. I'll draw the scout away, lead him on a chase, and I'll double back and find you." "Jerry!" "Ayanna, listen to me," he said, grabbing her reins and pulling her horse close. "This is what I do. I know how to lose a tail, but I can't do it if I'm worried about you. You have to trust me." He reached out and cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. The gesture was so gentle, so tender, it felt completely out of place in their desperate situation. "I will find you. I swear it on Elizabeth's memory. I will find you." Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sharp. She didn't want to leave him. In a few short weeks, he had become her partner, her protector, her only friend. The thought of facing the world alone again was terrifying. But she saw the logic in his plan, and she saw the conviction in his eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. "Go," he said, his voice urgent. "Now, don't look back." He slapped the rump of her mare, sending it lunging forward. Ayanna gripped the reins, kicked her heels, and rode as fast as she could, heading north toward the distant promise of the mountains. She didn't look back. She couldn't bear to. Behind her, she heard Jerry let out a wild whoop, and the thundering of his stallion's hooves as he galloped away in the opposite direction, a decoy drawing the hunter away from his true prey. For 3 days, Ayanna rode alone. The loneliness was a familiar ache, but it was different now. It was laced with a new and constant anxiety for Jerry's safety. Every night she would stare south, praying for a sign, for the sight of a lone rider on a black stallion. On the 3rd day, she reached the foothills. The terrain changed, becoming a jumble of rocks and pines, offering countless places to hide. She found a secluded cave near a stream, concealed by a thicket of wild plums, and decided to wait. She could not go on without him. She waited for a day, then 2. By the 5th day, a cold, hard knot of despair was tightening in her chest. What if he hadn't made it? What if the scout wasn't alone? What if Blackwood's men had caught him? The thought was unbearable. On the evening of the 6th day, as she was gathering firewood, she heard a sound that made her freeze, the soft nicker of a horse. Her heart leaped into her throat. "Jerry?" she called out, her voice trembling with hope. A figure stepped out from behind a stand of aspen trees. It wasn't Jerry. The man was tall and gaunt, dressed in a dusty black coat. His face was pale, dominated by a pair of cold, intelligent gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had a thin mustache and a neatly trimmed goatee that did little to soften the cruel set of his mouth. He held a silver-headed cane in one hand, though he didn't seem to need it for support. He looked like a predator, perfectly calm and utterly confident. Behind him, two other men emerged, both armed with rifles. They moved with a disciplined efficiency that spoke of military training. "Ayana," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured, but with an underlying tone of steel. "The Eternal Blossom. A pleasure to finally make your acquaintance. I am Colonel Alistair Blackwood." Ayana's blood turned to ice. He had found her. Jerry's diversion had failed. "Where is he?" she demanded, her hand instinctively reaching for the pistol Jerry had given her. It wasn't there. She had left it in the cave. A fatal mistake. Blackwood smiled, a thin, unpleasant curving of his lips. Jeremiah Stone? He was very entertaining. Led my man on quite a merry chase. But we are professionals, my dear, and he is merely an amateur, driven by sentiment. "What did you do to him?" she choked out, fearing the answer. "Mr. Stone is no longer a concern," Blackwood said dismissively. "He served his purpose. He led us to you. A rather foolishly noble gesture on his part, wasn't it? Sacrificing himself for a woman he barely knows." The colonel took a step closer, his gray eyes glinting. "But his foolishness is my gain. I have been searching for you for a very, very long time." Jerry was gone. The words echoed in the sudden, vast emptiness of her mind. He was gone. Dead. Sacrificed for her. The despair was so total, so absolute. It felt like she was drowning. But then, through the grief, a hot, white rage began to burn. This man, this monster, had taken everything from her, her safety, her future, and now the only person who had ever looked at her and seen a blessing instead of a curse. "You will not have me," she snarled, drawing her old hunting knife. It was a pathetic weapon against 3 armed men, but it was all she had left. Blackwood actually chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "My dear girl, you misunderstand. I already have you." He gestured with his cane. "The prophecy, the key, the hidden place. You are the culmination of my life's work. You are a masterpiece of fate. And I," he said, his eyes gleaming with a mad possessiveness, "am the world's foremost collector of masterpieces." He took another step, and that's when she saw it. Tucked into his belt, gleaming in the fading light, was a pistol. A unique pistol, with an ivory handle and a silver inlay of a running horse. It was Jerry's pistol. The proof. The final, brutal confirmation. The rage inside her exploded. With a guttural scream, she lunged at him, the knife held high, aiming for his cold, dead heart. She never had a chance. Before she had taken 2 steps, one of Blackwood's men moved with lightning speed, slamming the butt of his rifle into the side of her head. The world erupted in a flash of white-hot pain, and then everything went black. She awoke to the jarring rhythm of a moving horse and the coarse chafe of a burlap sack over her head. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back, and a throbbing ache radiated from her skull. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She was a prisoner. Blackwood had won. The smell of pine and damp earth told her they were still in the mountains. They rode for what felt like hours, the sack blocking all sight, leaving her disoriented and helpless in a world of darkness and pain. The grief for Jerry was a physical weight in her chest, so heavy she could barely breathe. He had died for her. He had sacrificed himself. And for what? For her to end up in the hands of the very man he'd given his life to escape. Eventually, the horses stopped. She was hauled roughly from the saddle and shoved forward. The ground beneath her feet changed from soft earth to hard-packed dirt. She heard the creak of a heavy wooden door, and then she was pushed inside. The air grew stale, thick with the smell of dust and disuse. The sack was ripped from her head. She blinked, her eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light filtering through a single, grimy window. She was in a small, sparsely furnished cabin. It looked like an old miner's hut, long abandoned. Colonel Blackwood stood by the door, watching her, his face a mask of smug satisfaction. "Welcome to your new home, my dear," he said. "It is modest, I admit, but it is secure. Very secure." "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Everything," he said simply. He began to pace the small room, tapping his silver-headed cane against the floorboards. "The prophecy your grandfather stumbled upon was incomplete, a fragment. I have spent years piecing together the rest. It speaks of a place the Apache call the heart of the mountain, a place of great power. Some say it holds a treasure beyond imagining. Others say it is a source of knowledge, of life itself. And you, my dear Ayana, are the only one who can open the door." "I don't know anything about a door," she said, defiance lacing her words. "Not consciously, no," Blackwood conceded. "But the key is in your blood. Your very presence is what's required. We are close, you see, very close. My sources tell me the entrance is somewhere in this very mountain range. We simply need to find the right spot. And you," he smiled that thin, cruel smile again, "are going to be my dowsing rod." He planned to drag her across the mountains until she stumbled upon this mythical place. "And what if I refuse?" she challenged. Blackwood's smile vanished. His eyes turned to chips of ice. "Then I will provide you with motivation." He walked to the door and opened it. "Bring him in." One of his men entered, dragging someone behind him. A man, beaten and bloodied, his clothes torn, his face swollen and bruised almost beyond recognition. But she knew him. Even in this state, she knew him. It was Daklugi, her cousin. They threw him onto the floor at her feet. He was bound, just as she was, but he was conscious. His dark eyes, full of pain, found hers. "Cousin," he croaked, his voice thick with blood. "How?" Ayana breathed, staring in horror. "My men are very, very good at their jobs," Blackwood said, a note of pride in his voice. "After Mr. Stone so kindly led us to you, we did a bit of reconnaissance. It seems your tribe was not far behind, tracking you. A rather touching, if foolish, display of familial concern. It was a simple matter to pick off the stragglers." He nudged Daklugi's side with the tip of his cane. "Your cousin here was quite stubborn. He refused to tell us anything about the heart of the mountain. He seems to believe it is his sacred duty to protect it." He looked at Ayana, his gaze sharp and malevolent. "But I have a theory. I believe his duty to protect his family might be even stronger." The threat was clear. Horrifyingly clear. Cooperate, or watch her cousin die. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I am a man of vision," he corrected her, "and I will allow nothing and no one to stand in my way." He leaned down, his face close to hers, his voice a venomous whisper. "So, you will help me, Ayana. You will walk with my men every day from sunrise to sunset. You will search for this place. And for every day you fail, for every sign of resistance, I will take another piece of your cousin. Do you understand me?" Tears of rage and despair streamed down her face. She looked at Daklugi, who was glaring at Blackwood with pure, unadulterated hatred. He had hunted her. He had tried to capture her. But he was her blood. He was her people. And Blackwood was going to torture him to death in front of her. She had no choice. She was trapped. Jerry was dead. Her cousin was a hostage. Her own life was forfeit. The curse had finally come full circle. It had not just destroyed her life. It was going to destroy everyone she had ever known. She gave a single jerky nod. "Excellent," Blackwood said, straightening up. "I knew you were an intelligent young woman." He turned to his men. "Give them some water. We start at dawn." As the door closed, leaving her in the dim, suffocating silence with her beaten cousin. A profound, soul-crushing hopelessness washed over her. She had fought so hard. She had survived so much. But it was all for nothing. The monster had won. For a week, life became a living hell. Every morning at dawn, Blackwood's men would haul Ayanna from the cabin. With a rope tied around her waist like a leash, she was forced to walk, to wander through the rugged mountain terrain. Blackwood followed at a distance, always watching, his presence a constant, chilling weight on her spirit. They were searching for a sign, a feeling, anything that might indicate the location of the mythical heart of the mountain. Ayanna gave them nothing. She walked with her head down, her heart a cold, dead stone in her chest. Each step was an act of defiance. She would not be his key. She would not lead this monster to a place sacred to her people. And every evening, Blackwood would make good on his promise. He would have Declugy dragged from the cabin, and in front of her, his men would inflict some new, calculated cruelty. It was never enough to kill him, but always enough to cause excruciating pain. A broken finger, a deep cut, a burn from a heated knife. Declugy never screamed. He would endure the torture with a stoic silence that was both terrifying and inspiring. He would meet Ayanna's eyes, and in his gaze, she saw no blame. Only a shared, burning hatred for their captor. The animosity that had defined their relationship for years, her as the outcast, him as the enforcer, had been burned away, replaced by the simple, brutal reality of their shared Apache blood. During the brief, dark hours they were left alone in the cabin, he would talk to her, his voice a hoarse whisper. He told her the truth about her exile. The medicine woman, Nanai Chill. She saw the prophecy of the living key in a vision when you were born, he rasped one night, after Blackwood's men had dislocated his shoulder. She knew that men like Blackwood would one day come looking for you. The curse. It was a lie, a terrible lie, but one she thought necessary. Ayanna stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend the revelation. She declared you cursed to drive you away, Declugy continued, to make the tribe fear you, to push you into the wilderness where no one would ever find you. She chose to make you an outcast, to save you from becoming a slave. When we came for you in the canyon, it was because we heard Blackwood was in the territory. We were trying to get to you first, to hide you properly this time, not as a punishment, but for your own protection. The cruelty she had endured for a lifetime had been a twisted act of love, a desperate, misguided attempt to keep her safe. The knowledge was another weight on her already shattered soul. I'm sorry, cousin, he whispered, his eyes full of a pain that had nothing to do with his physical wounds. For my part in it. I was young, I followed the elders, I did not understand. There is nothing to forgive, she whispered back, tears tracing paths through the dirt on her cheeks. By the end of the week, Declugy was barely conscious. Ayanna knew he couldn't survive much longer. Her defiance was killing him. Blackwood was winning. That night, as she listened to her cousin's shallow, ragged breathing in the darkness, she made a decision. She could not let him die. The next morning, when they dragged her from the cabin, she stopped. She looked at Colonel Blackwood, her eyes clear and cold. I will help you, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I will try to find your door. A triumphant smile spread across Blackwood's face. I knew you would see reason. She had no plan. She only knew she had to buy Declugy some time. For the first time, she actively tried to feel something from the land, to connect with it in the way the prophecy suggested. She closed her eyes, focused on the smooth, warm stone from her grandfather that she still had concealed in her boot, and walked. She led them for hours, deeper into a narrow, winding ravine. She followed the path of a dry creek bed, the rocks growing larger, the walls of the ravine steeper. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she felt a strange pull, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Finally, they came to a place where the ravine ended in a sheer rock wall, twice the height of a man. A small, clear spring trickled from its base, forming a pool of water so clear it looked like liquid glass. The air here was cool and still. There was a palpable sense of peace, of ancient power. Ayana stopped. She looked at the rock wall. There was no door, no markings, nothing, but she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was the place. The pull was stronger here than anywhere else. "Well?" Blackwood demanded, stepping up beside her. "Is this it?" Ayana placed her hand on the cold rock. The faint vibration intensified, singing up her arm. She could feel the power thrumming just beneath the surface. "Yes," she said, "this is the place." Blackwood's eyes gleamed with manic excitement. "How do we open it? What's the secret?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "Liar!" he snarled, raising his cane to strike her. But before the blow could land, a voice echoed from the cliffs above them, a voice she had thought she would never hear again. "Drop it, Blackwood!" Ayana's head snapped up. There, standing on the rim of the ravine, silhouetted against the bright blue sky, was Jeremiah Stone. He wasn't dead. He was alive, and he was not alone. Flanking him on both sides were at least 20 Apache warriors, bows drawn, arrows aimed at Blackwood and his men below. And at their head, her face grim and determined, was the old medicine woman, Nan Ichil. Jerry had done it. He hadn't just escaped. He had gone for help. He had found her people. He had brought them here. Hope, fierce and powerful, surged through Ayana's chest. Blackwood stared up at the impossible sight, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Stone. But how? "You're not the only one with Apache sources, Colonel," Jerry called down, his voice ringing with authority. "And you made one big mistake. You assumed I was working alone." It was a bluff, Ayana realized. He had been working alone. But by some miracle, he had found his way to her people and convinced them to join him. For a moment, no one moved. It was a standoff. Blackwood and his 2 men in the ravine below, trapped. Jerry and the Apache warriors above, holding the high ground. Then Blackwood did something unexpected. He laughed, a high, unhinged sound that echoed off the rock walls. "Fools!" he shrieked. "You think you've won? You've done my work for me? You've brought the key to the lock, and now you've brought the confirmation." His wild eyes darted between Ayana and the warriors above. "This is the place, and I still hold the winning hand." Before anyone could react, he grabbed Ayana, pulling her in front of him as a shield. He pressed the barrel of Jerry's ivory-handled pistol to her temple. "Drop your weapons!" he screamed up at the cliff. "All of you, or the girl dies and the door stays locked forever. I will have my prize, or no one will." The warriors on the cliff hesitated, their bows still drawn, but their aim wavering. They couldn't risk a shot. Not with Ayana as a shield. Jerry's face was a torment of rage and helplessness. He had come so close, only to be thwarted at the last second. Blackwood was cackling, drunk on his apparent victory. "I knew it. I always win. I am a man of destiny." But in his madness, in his single-minded focus on the people above, he had forgotten about the man on the ground. Daklugie. With a guttural roar that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth, Daklugie launched himself from the ground. He ignored his broken bones, his dozen wounds, his searing pain. He was no longer a man, but an embodiment of pure, primal Apache fury. He slammed into Blackwood's legs like a cannonball. The colonel screamed in surprise and pain, his balance thrown. The gun at Ayana's head wavered. It was the only chance she would get. Ayana drove her elbow back, hard, into Blackwood's ribs. He grunted, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. She twisted away, dropping to the ground as a single shot rang out from the cliff top. It wasn't an arrow, it was a rifle shot. Jerry's shot. Colonel Alistair Blackwood stiffened. A small, neat hole appeared in the center of his forehead. His eyes went wide with a final shocked surprise. He crumpled to the ground, his reign of terror ending in a single clean instant. Silence. The two remaining henchmen, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Ayana crawled to her cousin. Daklugi lay on the ground, a fresh, dark stain spreading across his chest. He had been hit by Blackwood's pistol as he fell. His breathing was shallow. "Cousin," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she cradled his head in her lap. He looked up at her, a faint, pained smile touching his lips. "The heart of the mountain is safe, Ayana," he rasped. "You are safe." His eyes fluttered and then closed. The hero of the moment, the man who had saved them all, was gone. Later, after the bodies had been dealt with and the prisoners secured, Jerry climbed down into the ravine. He knelt beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "He was a brave man," Jerry said softly. Ayana nodded, unable to speak through her grief. Nanai Cheel, the old medicine woman, made her way down the treacherous path. She stood before Ayana, her ancient face etched with a sorrow so deep it seemed to carry the weight of generations. "He died a warrior's death," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "He has restored his honor, and the honor of our family." She looked at the blank rock face of the ravine wall. The prophecy did not say the key would open a door to treasure. It said the key would unite the people, and that in a time of great darkness, the blood of a warrior, freely given, would seal the door against evil forever. She looked at the pool of blood where Daklugi had fallen, which was now slowly seeping into the ground at the base of the rock. "His sacrifice has protected this place," she said. "He did not just save you. He saved us all." She reached out and placed a hand on Ayana's head, the same hand that had once condemned her. "You are not Chaita, the cursed. You are Ayana, the uniter, our protector. Your exile is over. It is time to come home." The offer hung in the cool, still air. The thing she had yearned for her entire life, a place among her people, a home. She looked at the faces of the Apache warriors, who now looked at her with respect, not fear. She looked at the medicine woman, whose eyes now held warmth, not condemnation. Then she looked at Jerry, his green eyes full of love and concern, his hand still a warm, steady presence on her shoulder. She had a choice. Go back to the life that was stolen from her, or forward into a new life she had fought to build. She looked at Jerry and knew the answer. Her home wasn't a place anymore. It was a person. "My home is with him," she said, her voice clear and strong. Nanai Cheel nodded slowly, a deep understanding in her ancient eyes. "Then go. Build a life. Be happy. Know that you will always have a place of honor among the people. You are the bridge between two worlds, child. That was your purpose all along. Not a curse. A blessing." As they rode away from the ravine, heading north once more toward the promise of Colorado, Ayana looked back one last time. She saw her people gathered, silent and respectful, beginning the rituals to honor their fallen hero. She had lost a cousin, but she had regained a tribe. She had faced a monster and won. She had walked through the fire and emerged not burned, but forged into someone new. Someone strong. Someone who knew the true meaning of home. And as she rode beside the man who had walked through hell and back for her, she knew their future was as open and vast as the Colorado sky. The valley was even more beautiful than Jerry had described. A river of liquid silver snaked through a meadow of grass so green it hurt the eyes. Aspen groves shimmered in the breeze, and in the distance, snow-capped mountains clawed at the sky. It felt like the first day of creation, a place untouched by hate and greed. They filed a claim in the tiny, burgeoning town of Mountain View. The land agent, a cheerful man named Morrison, barely gave Ayana's unusual features a second glance. In this part of the country, all that mattered was a strong back and the will to work. Here, she wasn't a curiosity or a key. She was just a homesteader, a neighbor. They built their cabin with their own hands, a testament to their shared future rising from the valley floor. Jerry, with his ranger's pragmatism, built it strong and defensible. Ayana, with her Apache understanding of the land, made sure it sat in harmony with the wind and the sun. It was more than a shelter. It was a sanctuary. In the years that followed, life settled into a rhythm of hard work and quiet joy. They were no longer the hunted, but the builders. Their ranch grew, their herd multiplied. Jerry's past as a lawman earned him respect in the valley, and Ayana's knowledge of herbs and healing, learned from her mother and honed by years of solitary survival, made her the unofficial doctor for homesteaders for 50 miles in every direction. The woman who had been cast out as a curse was now sought out as a healer. They had children. First a boy, Thomas, with Jerry's wheat-colored hair and Ayana's quiet, observant nature. Then a girl, Mary, with her mother's fiery hair and her father's fearless green eyes. Their home was filled with a laughter and love so profound it seemed to chase away the last of the shadows from their past. One summer evening, nearly 10 years after they had arrived in the valley, a rider approached their homestead. He was a young man, perhaps 20 years old, with skin the color of copper and the unmistakable features of the Apache people. But his eyes were a startling, familiar shade of hazel green. He led a tired-looking horse, and he moved with a weariness that went beyond the trail. He stopped at their gate, looking at Ayana with a strange mixture of hope and trepidation. "I am looking for a woman named Ayana," he said, his voice hesitant. "I am Ayana," she replied, her heart giving a strange flutter. The young man took a deep breath. "My name is Daniel. My mother. Her name was Itzel. She was your younger sister." Itzel, her little sister. A face she had only seen in her memories, a child of 14 when Ayana was banished. "My mother passed into the spirit world many years ago," Daniel continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But she told me stories about the brave older sister who was sent away, the sister who was not cursed, but chosen. She told me that if I ever felt lost, I should ride north. She said I would find you, and that you would know what home felt like." He looked around at the peaceful ranch, at the sturdy cabin, at Jerry who had come to stand beside his wife. It seemed she was right. Ayana's eyes filled with tears. She walked to the gate and opened it wide. A piece of her past, a piece of her family, had ridden not with threats and demands, but with hope. A new branch of their family tree had found its way home. That night, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Ayana sat on her porch with her husband, her children, and the nephew she never knew she had. She thought of the long, twisted path her life had taken, the exile, the hunt, the battles, the loss. She thought of the word that had defined her for so long, Chaita, the cursed one. She looked at Jerry, at the lines of love and laughter etched around his eyes. She looked at her children, living proof that her life was a blessing. She looked at her nephew, a bridge to the past she had made peace with. The elders had been wrong. The curse was never in her blood. It was in their fear. She hadn't brought misfortune. She had found a life of unimaginable fortune. She had found love. She had found peace. She had found home. And she had earned every last, beautiful piece of it. If you were moved by Ayana and Jerry's story of survival and love against all odds, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales of justice, redemption, and the unbreakable power of the human spirit. You won't want to miss what happens when a lighthouse keeper discovers he's not the only one living in his isolated tower.